Today, you and I are going to build an app together using three AI code agents at the same time: Gemini CLI, Claude Code, and GitHub Copilot. Now, that might sound crazy to you, and in many ways, it definitely is, but we are going to try and orchestrate these agents properly, like a real engineering team, by giving them all subtasks and making sure that they communicate with each other properly. So, we're going to be kind of like AI puppet masters today. Now, let's just go ahead and see how well that idea actually works. So where do we actually start? Well, this might surprise you, but we're not starting in our code editors. In fact, right now I'm in Claude Desktop because the first thing you want to do is create an orchestration prompt, because you need to be able to kind of dictate different roles to these AI agents, as well as even describe what you're trying to build in the first place. And you can see that I actually have a very long conversation with Claude here. And in fact, this is version 48 of the orchestration prompt. Now, I'll be pasting the orchestration prompt that I used in a comment down below, but for now, you don't have to worry about that. Just keep watching the video and just walk along with me. So when I open this prompt here, you can see that it's a big one. But some things that you really need to know from the start here is that we are trying to build a new application that can help me learn AI skills. So if we actually scroll down to the project overview, you can see that the app name is AI Learning Tracker, with the purpose to track my learning progress, get AI generated review questions, and visualize my learning journey. And this is a great sample project because it's going to plug in with some existing AI systems, right? So it's a great AI engineering portfolio, for example. And we have a lot of core features here. And while all of that is nice, I think I want to display how we're actually distributing the roles between the different AI code agents. So if we go ahead and scroll down, you can see that there's different file ownerships for each and every coder. So Cloud Code owns mainly the backend paths, GitHub Copilot owns mainly the front end, and Gemini CLI will own a bit of the testing. Now, sometimes these code agents do need to overlap a little bit, but in general, this is a very traditional role distribution, right? GitHub Copilot is kind of like a front-end developer, whereas Claude Code is like a back-end developer, and Gemini CLI might be our test automation expert, which is very nice. And then, of course, there's a lot of other information here, like how they should be using Git commits to communicate with each other, which kind of solves a lot of problems at once. By creating Git commits regularly, if the AI agents mess up, they can revert changes, but this way they can also communicate to each other with commit messages. So look, this is a big prompt and I could go on about this for half an hour, but let's just go ahead and copy the prompt for now and just show you what it actually results in. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this prompt here, and then now I'm going to open Visual Studio Code, which is my editor of choice, but you can really do this in any, modern IDE that you want. And you can see that I've got a couple things open. We've got Gemini CLI, Claude Code, and on the right, we have GitHub Copilot. Now, to initialize this project, I will just be using GitHub Copilot, but once we have the project initialized, we will go ahead and run all of these agents at once. So I'm going to go ahead and paste an entire prompt, and then using the agent mode with Claude Sonnet 4, I'm going to go ahead and make it actually initialize the project, as well as create the different markdown files, which will be read by every code agent for them to understand what their responsibilities are in this project. So for example, now you can see that it's starting to set up this Next.js application. And while it's doing that, I want to just illustrate to you that this video is going to work best for new projects. If you're working in big legacy code bases, then this might be a bit of a stretch to do properly. But still, this is a great way to display what programming might look like in 2030, because these AI agents are getting better by the day, and they will eventually be able to communicate with each other properly without me having to even configure that. So I'm going to go ahead and actually configure some of these terminal commands. And now it's initializing the Next.js framework. Now, while it's installing those initial packages, it actually has an error because it cannot find this specific package. So it probably hallucinated that. And this is also why it's so important that you are kind of the orchestrator here, because there is human intervention necessary. There are so many people claiming that these AI agents can create complete code bases on their own. And honestly, in my real professional experience, that is just not true, because you can see right here that it fails at a pretty trivial task. But that's okay, because Copilot is able to understand what package names it should use, and then I have to just press continue and make sure that what it tries to do instead makes a lot of sense. So now it's going to go ahead and try to install the packages again, and there you go, it works. So this just shows you that these AI agents are self-repairing, but you need a human to control them. In this case, I, as the puppet master, will make sure that these AI agents are guided into the right direction. All right, so after a while, I actually managed to get the project set up in full, And I actually had to let Copilot know that it did already initialize this library, but other than that, it was pretty smooth. And you can see here on the left that we have a full Next.js project set up with all the dependencies that we need. So it's not just the frontend and backend that we have now. We also have libraries like this testing library to set up our tests for a proper application. Now what it's doing is it's creating those mission files for the different AI agents that we want to control. So for example, Claude Code. You can see here that there's a mission brief, like how it's the backend architecture and API development lead, and how it has exclusive write access to these certain routes. Now, the great part here is that you can see here that there's a task breakdown for the different kinds of tasks. And these all come from that initial orchestration prompt where I described the features that I actually wanted to work on. Now, what's fun is that if we check the Copilot mission, you will see that this looks very different because it's more front-end focused. So you can indeed see that this is the front-end development and user experience lead. And instead of having to create the backend API routes, if we scroll down, it's much more about creating different segmented components. And all of this is already written out in quite a lot of detail, which is quite cool. So you can see here how there's different stages again, and how there's even these different interfaces already, which match up with what the backend AI system is going to develop. And that's another important point why you want to start with the orchestration prompt, because then you make sure that the front end and backend are already pretty closely aligned. You might have to make some changes as human afterwards, but it will be either 100% there or 90% of the way, which is pretty great. So now you can see here that we are ready to actually start. So how do we actually get started with this? So what I've done is I've cleared out Copilot, and I just want to do one validation of the actual project setup to make sure that we start off with a functional state. So I'm going to go ahead and run npm run dev, and then we can check out that our project is actually set up successfully. So yep, here you go. It's obviously not the front page that we want to see, but the project is compiling and running properly. So perfect. We're going to close that now. Now, all I'm going to do is feed in the mission documents for each of these AI agents and nothing else. So we're going to drag Copilot mission into Copilot. I'm going to go back into my other terminals, and then we're going to drag the Gemini CLI mission in here. Bang. And then we're going to drag the Claude Code mission in here as well. Now, each of these CLI tools have like special commands that you can run to initialize the repository, and I do see people recommend me to use them, and I am a fan of them in some cases, but I want to teach you how you can actually prompt any AI agent properly. And the thing is, these CLI tools change very quickly, so some of those commands might change or be less effective, but actually learning how to prompt these systems will be a skill that's still going to be relevant 10 years from now. So that's why I'm doing it this way, and I'm not using the init command for Claude Code as an example. So now all I'm going to do is just submit this document for each of the agents. I have to type a small message for Copilot, so I'll just say follow the mission document. And so we're going to get this started, we're going to get this started, and we're going to get this started. So now we have this extremely cool parallel workflow where all these AI agents are going to get started and work together. Now, I actually expect this to not go over completely smoothly, and there are going to be issues, as well as things like this, where you see here, I have to actually interactively allow it to add new files. So that's obviously what I have to do here. And I'm going to just say always allow to create that command. And again, this is why you're the Puppet Master. You have to actually check out what the different AI agents are doing and help them out. So for example, I'm now seeing that Claude is actually not really starting yet. So I'm just going to ask it to get started on the mission for yourself. Because, sometimes you actually have to prompt the AI agent to do that. And now we're seeing actually that Copilot is starting to set up utilities and basic front-end components. Super cool. And we're seeing here on the left that Gemini is asking for my permission again. And in this case, it just needs to write to a file. So I wanted to always allow it to do that. And so you can see here that this is already getting very chaotic, but it's super cool, right? Like you can see how everyone is working on its own thing. And here, for example, Copilot wants to install some new dependencies for the front end. So we're going to go ahead and accept that. While that's happening, Claude Code is setting up a database schema. Makes a lot of sense because Claude Code is, of course, the backend engineer. And then we have to go back and check out what they're doing here. So yes, I wanted to make those changes and not ask again. Perfect. And you can really see it's just so weird. Like this kind of development workflow just didn't exist 2 years ago. And just look at us now. We are just controlling 3 AI agents at once. And let me tell you, if you're a junior engineer, this is very dangerous because these agents are going to do things that you don't understand. But if you have years of experience like me, It's still difficult, but I will be able to validate the code afterwards and make sure that things make sense. And if I'm starting a new startup or software as a service program, then I want to make sure that I actually get it into the market faster. And that is what this system will allow me to do. It's not going to create bug-free software, but if I create a simple web app, then a bug or two is not going to be a huge issue. But the speed that I can actually bring my app to market, that is the most important part. And that is something that these agents will actually help me achieve faster. And while I said that a bunch of new code has been added, and if we check out our Git changes here, you can see that there are already so many changes made. We have like so many new files from both the front end, the back end, as well as the testing perspective. And this really is a lot. Now, one thing to take into consideration is that the tests that are being written right now by Gemini might actually become outdated as the front end work is being done by Copilot. So, for example, I can see here that there are these test files, but they're not filled in yet, and they might become outdated as Copilot finishes up the front end work. So, sometimes you will need to just make sure that these agents rework what they've done and just read up on the latest version of the repository. And that's kind of when you have to stop the parallel work and just kind of ask these agents to do things sequentially, because you will not be able to build the full app in parallel like this. And you can actually see the effect here because Gemini already stopped creating new code because it created a bunch of test setup files, but it can't really test anything yet because the code by the front end and backend engineers is not finished. So I think that actually makes a lot of sense, and I think it's fine if we let Gemini rest for a little bit here. And now we can actually see that the layout is something that Copilot wants to test now by running npm run dev. We are going to validate that later manually. So in that sense, I think Copilot is also done. And we're just going to go ahead and let it keep all the changes. And we're just going to validate this later once Claude is actually finished with the backend. And you can see that it actually finished a lot of stuff, but it still has to create a couple of APIs. So I'll just let it run in the background and be right back with you when it's done. Okay, this makes a lot of sense. So what it is doing is it wants to add all of the changes for a single commit. But I will say that's not really what I want. I want to split up the different commits and make sure that each of the agents individually commits the work that they've done. So here you can see that the agents haven't exactly followed what I'm intending them to do, because in the initial instructions, I did actually kind of ask them to create Git commits, but I can also just achieve that by asking for that explicitly. I think for the purposes of this demonstration, I don't care too much about that, but these are things that you have to take into account. These AI models are not going to listen to all of your instructions. But the main thing that I'm trying to show right now is that we're using these agents simultaneously to set up the testing framework, to set up the front end, and to set up the back end. So we can indeed see in our source control that we have these front end components. We actually have these backend routes as well. And then we have the testing framework set up here at the bottom that I will need to revise again because it's not really been aligned with the front end work that has been created by Copilot, right? Now, the thing is, I'm going to run npm run dev, and I expect this to not work properly. And this is the differentiator that I want to have with my videos. There are so many AI code videos where they then just test out the app and they act like everything is working. I've seen videos where people have a dark theme and they click on the button and it doesn't do anything and they pretend like it's working. I'm going to tell you right now, this is not going to work from beginning to end. But that's okay, because it's a great start. And then from there, I can use either my senior engineer expertise to manually figure out and fix the code from this point forward, or I can focus with one specific AI agent like Copilot and then just get it to align the code. So I'm going to go ahead and just open a loose terminal here. I'm just going to restart the application with npm run dev. And then I'm going to go ahead and open the localhost page. Here we go. And you can actually see that we do have a bit of an initial front-end setup. So the dashboard, the topics, that page doesn't work already. We've got the progress. That page doesn't work already. We got the quiz. And then in addition, I think these are dummy values as well. So if I go to inspect element and I click on network, we can actually see whether it's creating calls to the backend when we fully refresh the page. So when I refresh the page, you can see that there are some calls being made, but that's just front-end work. We actually do not get any backend calls to fetch this data. So this shows you, okay, yes, we have set up backend routes, we have set up front-end routes, we set up the testing, but this is not a fully functional app. Oh, and what's funny is actually we do have a theme toggler here, and Well, actually, in my case, it does work, so that's cool. But this is obviously not a functional app. So what do you do from here? Well, right now, I want to make sure that one of these features properly works. So let's go ahead and actually make sure that this topics page properly works and that I can add a new topic that I want to learn. So I'm going to go ahead and quit out of these code editors, and I'm going to focus on using one AI agent to work out this feature in full. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new chat with Copilot here. I'm just going to go ahead and create one big commit out of this just because this is a YouTube video. I wouldn't do this in a normal scenario, but I want to show the changes that Copilot will make to actually make that one feature work properly. So I'm just going to call this initial commit. It's totally fine for now. It's just a demo. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste in all of the context related to the topic into Copilot so it actually knows what it's working with. So if I search for topic, you should be able to see that it's referenced in multiple places. So we, for example, have this route here. I think in general, what I'm just going to do is give Copilot the entire API folder as well as the entire front end folder, because that way it can actually just investigate the code on its own. So I'm going to go ahead and find the front end as well. So actually, if I search for /topic, which is probably supposed to be the URL, then in the sidebar here, you can see how it tries to navigate the /topics, but this is not actually a real page that's implemented. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the components folder here as well and explain the issue. So multiple agents have worked on setting up this initial project, but of course, it is a bit messy and not fully implemented. Now let's laser focus on making sure the topics page is created and works with the backend API so that I can add new topics that I want to learn. To do this, explore the API and front-end code and add new components or API changes where necessary. So here you can see that instead of all of this chaos with these parallel agents, I'm really just focusing with Copilot and making sure that this one feature works properly. So let's just let this do its thing, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, we're back, and you can actually see that I had a pretty extensive session here with Copilot. We ran some database migrations, and now everything should be up and running. So let's go ahead and check our site again, and we're on the dashboard once more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click into topics, and then, okay, the page loads. We have some new components here, and it actually is doing a backend call to retrieve our topics, but of course I didn't add any yet. So let's go ahead and add a new topic, and then we can give it a title like, I want to learn how to do, obviously, parallel AI agent coding. That's kind of what we're covering in this video. And that's, of course, programming. And I'm going to go ahead and create a topic based on that. And then there you go. Now it actually creates the topic, and you can see that it responds with some metadata about the creation there. So this actually shows you that now I have a very nuanced and good discussion with Copilot, and we're implementing the learning topic. And then from here, I want to add a bunch of AI features to make sure that I can actually test myself on my AI agent coding skills. And that's kind of going to be the added value of this app compared to just literally writing a to-do in Google Keep. Because this is another issue that I see with a lot of these videos where they show AI agent coding. They have these apps that already exist in 100 different places. Like what I've done so far, right, with this page, with this dashboard, with the topics, this is nothing like revolutionary or actually innovative. It's a pretty standard web app, but I did set it up much faster than I would otherwise. So I hope that this video showed you that I'm serious about giving you real AI coding skills instead of all of the nonsense hype around it making you 10 times as productive, because it will make you more productive, but there's just a nuance to it that I'm trying to cover with these kinds of tutorials. If you enjoyed this and you want to learn more AI coding and learn how to build AI systems to make yourself future-proof, you should definitely check out my AI engineering community in the link in the description below, and I hope to see you there.